We all know that main characters and heroes play a big role in anime, but what would those characters and their stories be without their counterparts? The villains. I would argue that villains play an important role within their respective stories. So today I'll be talking about one specific villain and ranking him based on a few different discussion points. Allow me to introduce you to Dio Brando. Dio is a very recognizable villain with his immense aura and fluorescent yellow outfit, as well as his very popular phrase, he is definitely one of my favorites, but I'll do my best to keep my bias out of this. Now, let's start things off by talking about his intelligence and resourcefulness. Dio Brando is exceptionally cunning and strategic, often staying several steps ahead of his opponents. His ability to master and utilize various powers, from his early vampirism against Jonathan to overpowered stand abilities against Jotaro. This showcases his intellect and resourcefulness to learn new skills. Dio is also a master of adaptation. He adapts to changing situations quickly and exploits his enemies' weaknesses, ensuring he remains a constant threat. This power of adaptation really shows in his fights, where he's able to turn the tides at any point. He always has something up his sleeve. Something else Dio has an insane amount of is charisma. Dio possesses a magnetic charisma that draws people to him no matter where he goes, enabling him to manipulate and inspire followers with ease. No matter where he is, he seems to always have some group of people under his spell. His presence commands attention, and he has a knack for making people believe in his vision, even if it leads them to their own doom. This ability to control and bend others to his will, often exploiting their desires and weaknesses, makes him a dangerous adversary. Now, what's a great villain without learning about their motivation and backstory? One could argue that Dio's motivations are deeply rooted in his traumatic upbringing. Growing up in an abusive environment with his deadbeat father, he develops a strong hatred for weakness and poverty. His ambition to rise above his circumstances and achieve godlike power drives his actions. The same situation could be seen as a tough beginning for a hero's story, if only Dio went about it that way. Instead, he begins a quest for immortality and dominance, not only for personal gain, but to prove his superiority above all, especially the Joestar bloodline. Speaking about superiority and dominance, let's talk about Dio's powers, because having sick powers only makes a villain cooler, right? Dio's power evolves significantly throughout the series, from his superhuman vampiric abilities, instant regeneration, and the time-stopping stand, the world. His abilities make him nearly invincible for most of the series, instilling fear and awe in those who oppose him. We do get to see a ton of powerful stands throughout Stardust Crusaders, but none that could top the power of the World and Star Platinum. Giving Dio this overpowered stand, I think, was a good choice, because he has been on a constant search for power ever since the beginning, and naming it the World was a nice touch, because I know Dio would love to own this entire planet. Now, switching things from power to flaws, every character has to have some type of flaw, unless you're Rem from ReZero, who is flawless and can do no wrong. Anyways, back to Dio. Despite his immense power, Dio has some significant flaws, such as his arrogance and overconfidence. Dio absolutely reeks of overconfidence, as he doesn't see anyone of equal power to him, and he loves to shit talk. He tends to rely heavily on his regeneration at times, and of course his time stop abilities to overcome any kind of threat that comes his way. However, once Jotaro learns to get past his time stop, Dio does start to panic, because this has never really happened before, and because of his vampire blood, he is also very weak against the classic Hamon. If it weren't for his resourcefulness and ability to adapt so quickly, I think Dio would be much more vulnerable to things. Now, another topic people like to speak on when it comes to villains is whether they are right or wrong. A great example of this would be Light Yagami from Death Note and his power to essentially play God. There could be an argument made for both sides why this power is good or why this power is evil, and think about it, I might actually make a video about that, so stay tuned. Now, let's tie this back to Dio. While Dio is predominantly evil, I mean just straight up evil, his actions are driven by a complex mix of personal trauma and ambition. I'd say he represents the darker aspects of ambition and the corrupting influence of power, while also exploring the consequences of unchecked desire for dominance, because really he has no one above him telling him what's right or wrong. Dio is simply following his own desire. Now, I would argue that Dio isn't as complex as other villains across all of anime, and I personally think that not all villains need to have that gray area between right and wrong to be a great villain, and it absolutely does add to the complexity, but doesn't necessarily make the villain that much better. You can have a great villain without the complexity. Now, one thing I do believe makes a better villain is their personal connection to the main character. This allows for a deeper story that can pull audiences in and build stronger connections. Dio is the perfect example for this because of his personal vendetta against Jonathan Joestar and his descendants. This adds a deep layer of tension to the entire story because we know where this hatred came from, as it was built in from the very first season. Now, this multi-generational conflict creates emotionally charged battles, making their rivalry more intense and personal. The deep-rooted connection to the Joestar family fuels the overarching narrative and heightens the stakes, especially because Dio is fighting everybody in Jonathan's body. And tying all that history together makes it so satisfying for when Jotaro ends this whole dispute. Now, taking everything we just discussed into consideration, I would rank Dio into S tier. I mean, what else did you expect? I did mention in previous videos and in the beginning of this one that I'm a little biased when it comes to JoJo. However, even without my bias, I think Dio has solidified his place in S tier due to all the things mentioned in this video and based on how loved and popular he is within the anime community. If you disagree with my ranking, let me know in the comments where you would place him, and get this video to 100 likes for me to rank another villain. Thanks for watching.